Good afternoon and welcome to, of course, our Unearthing program. We are absolutely thrilled to be able to talk about a very difficult, a very interesting and a somewhat delayed diagnoses for some people. We're talking about pathological demand avoidance today, or for short, PDA. And I say the reason it's delayed is because the founder of PDA was a lady called Professor Elizabeth Newson. And in the mid-1980s, she very much wanted to acknowledge that there was a difficulty for a number of autistic young people who were exhibiting not bizarre, but very dramatic ways of coping with their anxiety. And of course, I'm talking about meltdowns. Now, what's really interesting is that it has taken several decades. So we're only been talking about PDA actively in the communities up and down the country for the last 2 to 5 years, which is really quite strange when you think about Professor Newson was highly regarded in her field, working with autistic young people and families. So to only now be talking about it as it's being very much in vogue begs the question of why the delay. But even more bizarrely, we have professionals within CAMS and community pediatrics who are not really able to work with PDA because it simply doesn't exist in their world, their working world. So what I mean by that is that it is not recognised, it's not in the DSM-5, which is effectively the medical Bible of definitions of disorders or illnesses. And it's not even acknowledged by the NICE guidelines. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is changing, but right now it is not being acknowledged other than people talking about it. You might get speech and language therapists and occupational therapists saying, yes, your child is presenting as PDA, but the M word definitely will help you recognize whether you've got PDA presentations or features with your young family member in a mental health assessment and initial screening. But today we're just going to investigate a bit further. So I'm to ask Yasmin a very sneaky question. What do you think about the label PDA? I mean, is it nice? Does it describe what you think you've got? I mean, these professionals who come up with these names, I'm just wondering what you think about pathological demand avoidance.
Well, PDA as an abbreviation means something very different to me, so I think it's too common of an abbreviation, because until recently I thought it just stood for public display of affection, but okay, here we are. Because I didn't know what it was beforehand, so it's kind of, there's so many things that can stand for PDA. It's like, oh, okay. And I also find that if you're speaking to somebody and it's kind of quite medical talk, it sounds very negative, even when they're trying to sound very monotone about it. It does kind of sound, unfortunately, not great to be diagnosed with it. It's kind of very official and like, you fit in this box, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I suppose it's just carrying on the theme for me, because we have in the mental health arena some individuals who are not caught early enough with autism and anxiety and low mood, and they come about with a diagnosis in the late teens and early adulthood of borderline personality disorders, or worse, emotionally unstable personality disorders, which is really negative. And then if you think about autism, quite often people would shorten it to ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. And I would like to assert I am not disordered. People might think my thinking it is disordered, but I am not feeling disordered. So I was just thinking that, you know, there's this current theme, isn't there? The pathological sounds a bit in your face, doesn't it? It doesn't sound warming, welcoming, and yes, I'd like to be associated with that, does it?
I don't think it helps either. When you say pathological, I automatically think liar. You're a pathological liar. Okay, and it's like, oh, okay. You know.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It is interesting because so when Professor Newson designed a screening tool, she didn't call it pathological demand avoidance. She was thinking very much about the anxiety. And so she called it an extreme demand avoidance. Now that seems a lot better to me because it is that understanding that you are trying to avoid whatever's causing you the anxiety. And when you think about the fight or flight responses, both have a sudden surge of adrenaline flowing through your body. And when we're thinking about PDA, we are not thinking about, oh, I'm trying to avoid the anxiety. What we're thinking about is I'm trying to avoid the trigger. But the body is most definitely telling the mind, here we go again. You need to get away from this. And because of that surge of adrenaline, it's such an uncomfortable feeling. And people with PDA do not like that in any way, shape, or form. That surge of adrenaline is so uncomfortable that they learn very quickly, like Pavlov's dog syndrome, to avoid anything that will trigger the surge of adrenaline. So you can see where Professor Newson was going with saying the form is an extreme demand avoidance because they, you know, young people do not want to experience that level of anxiety. Now, looking back over your life, given that your diagnosis was only in the last 5 years, are there any incidences now that you go, oh yeah, that was PDA?
I wouldn't say obviously that jump out at me because I'm still kind of learning about what it is because, you know, it's nothing new to me. It's kind of just the way I've been my entire life. So it's very hard to suddenly go, oh, maybe that's not just my personality trait. Maybe that is actually linked with something that makes me different. You know, but I know I still, even now, I do things you go, oh, that's your PDA coming out. And it's like, oh, is it? Okay. You know, I don't have a menu in my brain and select, oh, do I want to do the autism option or do I want to do the PDA option? I don't know. I'll have a wild guess. Oh, let's have the dyslexic option. We'll do that today. It kind of just, you know, happens.
Yeah. It's a very good point, isn't it? I think for me, one of the earliest incidences I can remember for you, and I've had a few parents say the same thing about their children. We know that toddlers have tantrums. We know this. But when you were 2.5, and I don't know if you remember this, in the middle of Oxford, in the middle of a very packed cafe, you were literally trying to climb the walls. And I managed to scoop you up and get you out. And we went round the back of the cafe where it was a very quiet street, and you just had a full blown, I'm lying on the ground. It's like doing those snowman impressions with snow, you know, arms going everywhere, legs going everywhere, shouting, screaming, crying. It was a very, what did we do? And it took you such a long time to come back down from it, whereas tantrums don't generally last that long, and tantrums definitely are not that extreme dramatic. It was a really, honestly, the first time I'd ever seen it, I was just so gobsmacked. I was like, wow, hang on a minute, I haven't got these as skills. What is this? And then I, you know, obviously as you slowly but surely managed to come back down, you were a wreck, just such a wreck. And for a little person who is just so so inconsolable, sorry, with, you know, tears drying down your face as we drove home, and just so tired and just so broken by the whole experience. It was a real insight to, this is, something's not quite right here and I don't know what's wrong. Do you remember that? Because I know we've talked about we've talked about the cafe, and you remember that bit.
I also remember this old couple walking past and looking down the street going, ooh, and then walking past, and they were like, is she all right? And you went, yeah, she's fine. And it's like, you know, but I can't tell if it's, I don't remember as much of it because, you know, I was very young, or if I've just kind of chosen to to block that out, because, you know, I can think of other times where I've had kind of like, not aggression moments, but moments that have seemed to have like come out of nowhere to the point I'm physically shaking, and it's like it's bodily painful. Number one being when I was 10 and I slammed the door off its hinges. that one was pretty bad. That one was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I honestly to this day could not tell you what it was over. And the only thing is I know is I slammed that door and it tried to squash me. So, yeah. And you just came running up the stairs going, what's happened? I've had this eek and I'm stood there going, I can't move. This door is going to squash me. So, you know.
Very dramatic. But it's that horrible, I mean, I just can't get over the sensation I experience when I have PDA. And it's just, you know, it can make me cry, because I don't understand why I have to experience this incredibly uncomfortable feeling, and I know that I'm probably going to be shot to pieces with exhaustion due to the emotion running through my body, and that really upsets me because, you know, I'm a bit of a workaholic and I need my energy, and if I haven't got it because it's been blown, I'm stuffed. I can't do very much. And I see that a lot for you at times when you are so distressed, and it just wipes us out, doesn't it?
It's like being flustered but on steroids. And the thing is, you don't know what it's about either. So it can come out of nowhere, and you're trying to like really quickly rack your brain going, okay, what is it that's caused this? And you just can't find it. It's not in the system. There's seemingly no reason for this to kind of happen, and sometimes it happens, and then you kind of go like, oh god, I could sleep for like 100 years, and you're sat there and think, what was it? Because there must have been something, but whatever it is, it can be very minute, but when it pushes you over the edge, it really does kind of push you. You know, like I think the only one time that I've ever been able to pinpoint exactly what it was when I got frustrated because I couldn't fit things in the freezer properly. And like you guys were busy, so I was like, I have to do it myself. And I know that what got me so irritated and kind of so flustered about it was the fact that there was clearly a way that everything could fit. It was like the worst game ever. Because I was like, there's clearly a way it can fit, and it proved to be a point because you did it within like 5 minutes, and I'm sat there going, are you serious? I've just had like a full-on meltdown, stress over something that like somebody else did in 5 minutes, and I'm sat there for like an hour and a half going, oh my god, food's melting. I've got a time. There's like a timer running out, and you've like, I've got to do it within this time frame, and if I don't, something's gonna happen, or like, you know, it can be very stressful.
So what I've learned over the many decades is that there are very, like you say, minute clues, but you have to be able to recognize it, to capture it really quickly, because you know, and I know that if you don't, it runs away with you, really, because it's that surge of adrenaline, and it's incredibly frustrating because you're just like, you know, what happened? What have I missed? But in those moments, what we find is that actually we have missed the very early sign. And when you're describing, there has to be a way of making it work. And then I come and fix it for you. And you go, you see, I knew that. I knew it all along if there was a way. But when you're getting flustered, some people describe it as brain fog. Some people describe it as being really cluttered in their mind. They just can't think straight. It doesn't really matter how you describe it. What happens when we have the adrenaline is that the only interest this body of ours has, the only interest this mind of ours has, is to preserve life. So it literally eliminates where the blood needs to go. It just sends it on its merry way. And of course, the only thing that's paramount in here is fight or flight. And the only thing paramount in your legs and your hands, because you can feel the energy, can't you, going through when you're getting more and more flustered. You've been alone. And it's just because the adrenaline's just pumping its way through. It's almost like you say, steroids. There seems no understanding of, to the body. Could you just, measure it? Don't just throw the whole bucket over me. Just measure it in a small quantity. But it doesn't work like that, does it? So when we have that horrendous surge, our thinking ability literally goes down. And when you think about being autistic, we already have slower processing because we're trying to figure it out. So we're just now being squashed. And the other thing that I can imagine when you're trying to get it in is you're not really moving. You're just trying to wrestle to get it in. And yet that reduces your thinking even more because, of course, with ADHD, you need to be able to keep moving.
Yeah.
So it's like a triple whammy, isn't it? Okay, so if it's like that, then thinking about that, I just wondered if it was useful to kind of go through a few of the screening questions that Professor Newson designed specifically for autistic people to see what you think of them. So I'm sorry, I need my glasses because, as you know, I'm blind as a bat. Right then, so the very first question that she's got is, you obsessively resist and avoid ordinary demands and requests. Now, what do you make of that one?
I've kind of got to give myself a couple of seconds to translate it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like it's like, okay, you've just gone through a dictionary and thought, I'll pick out the most complicated words and form them in a sentence and expect everyone to know what that means.
Yeah. So just think about your resisting and avoiding. So resisting and avoiding ordinary demands and requests. So, questions or a demand. So if I say, you need to do that now, how would you respond?
Normally say I'll do it in a minute. But that's normally
not
because I don't want to do it right now. It's normally because you come in while I'm doing something else and it's like, can you not see I am in the process of doing something else? But
so what happens if I ask you to do something you really don't like doing? So for example, I mean, this is classic for you, isn't it? Thinking about, can you do something for Facebook to put on the community page right now? And it might be something that you haven't even got your head around. What's your automatic reaction? Be honest, because I'll be telling everybody you've been telling me porkies. So what's it like when I say, oh, can you do something? And you're like,
okay, well, if we're going to do it like that, sometimes you ask for the moon and I can't even give you a tree, okay? So, sometimes you're like, can you do this, and this? It's like, no, I can't.
So what happens in that process? Because I've just seen it in your face. And, I'm going to have an allowance for everybody else. They don't know Yasmin like I know Yasmin, but I've just literally seen it in your face. So immediately capture that thought. What did you just think?
Rabbit in the headlight syndrome, really, to be honest.
There you go. You see? So Professor Newson was onto something when she put that as the very first question. And the thing that I really love about this lady is that she recognized that because of this adrenaline surging in, because of our ability to think clearly, we no longer listen to the content of the question. It is that rabbit in the headlights. We're just like, no, it's just like, I don't want to deal with that. Go away, leave me alone. So it's not a case of hearing the question, the content of it. It's that immediate revulsion to this anxiety being triggered. And all it was a question. And I know you say sometimes I ask for the moon. But it feels like that. It feels like that.
No,
and evidence
no.
is.
It is that. It's that. Because sometimes you ask for things, it's like, do you think I have a graphic design degree or something? Because no, I just click things until it works.
There you go. But in that moment afterwards, when you're able to process that, what you find is you are able to go, I can do this in a way that I can deal with it. And again, that's PDA, because you've taken the control. Your anxiety is reduced, you've taken the control, and you are able to say, okay, I can do it in this way. And providing I don't put any further demand on you, you then go away quite happily and come back with normally a selection of, do you like this, or this? But in that first moment, that PDA just absolutely kicks in. And I think it is a real hardship for a lot of families who don't understand that in their moment, it's typical family life, please go and do this. Can you get this? Can you do what I've asked you? I've asked you 20 times. Will you please go and, bring down the plates, or, wrappers, sweet wrappers from your room, or I've told you to tidy up, or I've asked you 20 times, will you please go and have a shower? And all of these just generate this fog and anxiety that they feel completely, well, just, like a rabbit in headlights. So let me ask you another one then, okay? So, do you complain about illness or physical capacity when avoiding a request or a demand?
Sometimes, yeah, but I think that.
So this is really interesting, because a lot of people with PDA, families are constantly saying, oh, they're always saying they're tired, or they can't do it, or they've got a sore leg or sore arm, or they can't write, or da-da-da-da-da-da. And you just think, yeah, well, they are. I had one mum saying, it's so frustrating. We've finished dinner, and I've cooked it, I've laid the table, everybody comes and has dinner, and then everybody vamoosh out of the room, and I'm left to tidy up. And when I asked, please, will you just take your plates to the dishwasher? People just suddenly, disintegrate. They just vanish. And it's a case of, oh, so I'm left to do everything else. But again, it's that expectation, isn't it? It's quite stressful, and people don't appreciate it. So I hear this as a common complaint a lot of the time. Okay, what about everyday pressures, like going on a school trip or visiting the dentist? Now, I think this is a bit of a strange one, because that's not an everyday pressure. You don't go to the dentist every day, and you don't go on a school trip every day. But having something as a new transition is particularly stressful, isn't it? So it's just getting you to think about, what would you say about that?
I think things where I don't know the routine of things can be quite, stressful. Like, I don't know what environment I'm going into, and I know that I don't like the idea of sticking out. So if I go into a restaurant or something and I haven't pre-checked the menu, which is like, an amateur move, because I need to know it's safe. If I go in and suddenly realize, oh God, there's nothing on here that I can eat, because I know I'll just pick at it, I'm like, well, I can't get up and leave. Everyone's going to look at me. So that stresses me out. And then it's kind of like, I'm trapped and I'm not being held hostage, but it kind of feels like that, because it's like, if I leave, everyone is going to look at me. But even everyday things, so like college, that stressed me out every day. I was having to kind of get up, and I would get dressed, and I'd be like, okay, well, I'm dressed now, so I kind of have to leave the house. And then so I'd leave the house, and then I go, well, I'm walking to the train station, so I have to buy the train ticket. And then it was kind of like every step I was going, I can't go home now because I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And then I'd get to the gates, and I'm like, when I could visibly see it, and I was like, no, I don't want to do this, and go straight back home, you know. So I think it can be everyday situations. You can do something every day. You could go down to the bus stop every day, and it's still stressful because you're relying on other people to keep the routine similar. Like, I'm not saying everything has to be exactly the same, but if I go to the corner shop, I know the route. I don't go with people, so I'm in my own little world. But if somebody, like a tourist, tries to stop me and ask for directions, I'm suddenly like, oh, that's thrown me. I want to go home now because you've kind of ruined my pre-thought out plan. You know, and I shared a TikTok on our community group the other day about how some people with ADHD, when we're looking at routes in our head, it's a very 3D model that we can walk through. So when I'm walking through this route in my head, I didn't expect John from number 32 to come and ask me a question. I wasn't pre-planning for that, so I don't want it to happen. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, I can't straight out say, please leave me alone. I don't care. I don't want to talk to you. But you know, it's thrown me for a loop because it's not what I pre-planned to happen, and that can be very stressful, especially if it's something that it's out of the norm and it's something that you've kind of gotten used to, and then something happens and suddenly like, oh my god.
So do you think then that reduced your ability or your confidence to kind of go out more frequently?
Yeah, I have to psych myself up to go out. It's like, you know, I've proper, it's normally like the night before, the day before, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to go. Okay, I'll go tomorrow because then I've got a couple of hours to kind of hype myself up. You know, and I still get quite nervous to go into the village because we had that bus issue a while ago, and a lady came out and said, are you waiting for the bus because it's already gone? And I was like, she spotted me. She knows I've done something wrong. I cannot be seen. You know, that's embarrassing. She's just going to remember me as a person stood like an idiot on the corner of the street. You know, so it's kind of like, okay, I really have to take a deep breath. We're going tomorrow. We'll go get there and back. And then I'll come back and go, well, nothing happened. It was fine.
It's interesting because you've said, you know, I've done something wrong. And what had you done wrong?
I know I haven't done anything wrong, but at the time I was sat there thinking, somebody is going to be looking at me thinking, what an idiot. And then it's like, I don't want to, I'm never going to see her again. But I don't want her to think, like, 2 months down the line, oh, do you remember that idiot who stood by the bus stop when there was no bus? Like, you know, I don't want to be associated with that.
And yet, here's the thing. Do you seriously think she would remember?
I don't know. Probably not. But I don't want to take a gamble on that. You know?
Oh, yes, man.
And that's the thing. It makes me so painfully awkward of the thought of somebody has caught me in an embarrassing situation. That it's not embarrassing. Anybody else, I'd be like, oh, it's fine. What are you thinking about? But when it comes to myself, I'm like, no, They will be thinking about it. They will be thinking, what an idiot. You know, they'll be thinking all these things about me. You know, if you were to say the same story, I'd be like, it's fine, whatever. Nobody cares. Nobody noticed. But when it comes to me, everyone's going to notice. Everyone will remember. How embarrassing.
But you see, now with that snapshot that you've provided us, what we already know from that is that you were already anxious before you even got there. So do you see what I mean? That horrible surge that's so amplified of adrenaline leaves you feeling really quite vulnerable, and the negative thinking is just going absolutely bonkers, isn't it? Why is it that if I was standing there and I relayed the story to you, you'd be like, no, it's fine, nobody would have noticed. And yet you're standing there in the moment with this horrible amount of energy from the adrenaline, and it's just so uncomfortable, but it's causing huge amounts of distress. And I don't know, I think there are a lot of people who don't suffer with PDA who just probably think we've lost the plot, because why would we be so distressed by a very simple act of standing at the bus stop? Loads of people miss their buses, for a variety of reasons. They were running late, or the bus was running early, and it was in a hurry, whatever. But in that moment, we do get highly distressed. Okay, well, let me try you with another one then. Mimicking is an interesting one. So Professor Newson identified that sometimes autistic children with PDA will learn to mimic a parent or a teacher in telling other people or children off. Can you relate to that?
Yeah.
Tell us all.
I think it kind of added to my goody two shoes persona at school, I think. Yeah. One specific one I remember was when I was younger. It wasn't like forbidden to say it, but we didn't say shut up. So when people at school said shut up, I'd go, that is so offensive. My mum said you shouldn't say that. And then because somebody wouldn't stop saying it, I made up a lie and said it was offensive in my culture to say it.
What?
Just so they would stop. It worked. I can't remember what culture I said it was offensive to. I think I tried to make out we were partly Russian or something. They believed me. But it was like, think about it logically. Shut up is not that offensive, but it I clearly put enough of an act on that they were like, oh, I'll never say it again. I'll never say it again. I was like, hey, yeah, you won't.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite interesting, because that leads into another thing that Professor Newson identified: takes on roles or characters from TV or real life and acts them out. You see, it's there, isn't it?
I do not do that.
It's interesting because autism, we know, because we sometimes don't understand thoughts and feelings, especially those with alexithymia, it's really difficult to know what to do or what to say or what to feel. So we're really dependent upon people around us to kind of, if you watch a lot of people, like my mum used to complain bitterly that all I did was people watch. But I didn't know how to do things. So I had to watch lots of people to kind of get a commonality of, oh, okay, so this is how you do things. And I remember one meeting with a friend who had something really horrendous happen to them, not life-threatening, but it was very embarrassing for them. And I was so eager to kind of pitch in that I said it really loudly, and in the process forgot their name, so gave them the wrong name. And I was so mortified, but I was so desperately trying to get my piece in to feel included in the discussion, because up till then I'd been so mute. So of course it looked even more dramatic when I was saying it. But we're trying to mimic, to understand this is what people do, this is what's acceptable as social etiquette. And again, that's really time consuming but exhausting, because there's constant anxiety of, am I saying it right? Am I doing it right? Are they judging me for how I'm saying it? If I said it wrong, particularly when you think about, sometimes it's really difficult to remember difficult words, and you're trying to remember the right word, and in the end you give up, you just put something else in, and people then look at you a bit strange as, really? Is that what you really meant? You know, so although it can be very comical within family members, you know, there are other times when other people outside will judge you for not getting it quite right, which only adds more to the pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially when it's so I had a conversation with somebody a while ago, and we were talking about like what do we like doing, and I was talking, it's like, oh, I really like creative writing and poetry. I'm quite like, I do that quite a lot, and I forgot the word for a collection of poems, and I was so sure it was something like ornithology, which obviously isn't ornithology, because ornithology is the study of birds. But I was like, that's so close. That's the word I'm thinking of. It wasn't the word I was thinking of, but the words are very similar, so I understand where I got confused. But it was like, now I look like an idiot because I said I'm good at it or I'm passionate about it, and I can't even remember the actual word for it. And it's kind of like, oh, I've just kind of lost your respect a little bit there, didn't I? Oops. You know, or it's worse when I'm with you or Dad and I say, it's a word like this, but it means this. And then I'm like, and the thing is, I'm specifically thinking of that word. So we were talking about F1 the other day, and I was trying to think of the word legacy, and I just couldn't think of it.
Yes.
And you multiple times you went, okay, well just continue. What's your point? And I was like, no, I have to get this word specifically. And then I went, oh yeah, I had to Google it, and I went, it's legacy, and you went, oh, was that it? And I was like, yeah, but it was annoying me that I couldn't remember it. You know?
Yeah. And not getting very frustrated in trying to remember it also just fuels the fire, doesn't it? It's that, why can I not think of this?
And then it's like,
what about, go on.
Yeah, go on. No, go
on. So I was just going to say, what about, are you good at getting around others and making them do as you want?
You say yes. I say no, because I don't feel like, I don't pre-plan to do it, if that makes sense. I don't feel like I'm doing it maliciously. I haven't pre-planned, oh, I'm going to get round you, I'm going to make you do what I want. It's not how that comes out. It kind of just happens, and then you go, oh, you've done it again, got your own way, and it's like, did I? I clearly just said the right words in the right combination without realizing, and that's managed to kind of bring you round. And sometimes people go, oh, you're really manipulative, and it's like, but I don't mean it in that way. It's just kind of happened.
Yeah. I think back, I mean, well, let's ask the question. Do you think I do that?
Sometimes, yeah.
In what way? I'm intrigued now. In what way do I do it?
No, because this isn't an episode of Jeremy Kyle, so we'll just we'll just move on.
I was just got me intrigued now. I was just thinking,
I'm not having you bring it up later up in an argument going, you said this and I quote. It'll be like, so no, move on.
I was just thinking about how sometimes, and I don't think we do this often, but again, it's that real sense of control driven by anxiety, but it looks like anger. And my mum was really good at, how can I say, creating a tense atmosphere so that everybody suddenly felt very much walking on eggshells and complete tenterhooks and did the bare minimum, but just, you know, allowed her to just push her way, that we were going to do things on her terms and conditions. And honestly, I mean, I remember driving from Edinburgh to halfway point to get down to down towards the lowlands, and I couldn't hold the petrol cap. I couldn't hold it properly to put the fuel in the car. And in the end, I just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm shaking like a leaf. I can't even hand over the money without looking as if I've, so I drove home, and I got really frustrated with myself, because I thought, how does this woman generate so much fear and intimidation when I feel completely out of control. And that really was frustrating indeed. But that air of tension anticipated was not comfortable.
I think it's always very hard to try and process how somebody can have such an effect on you. Like, they have this so much power over how you think and feel, but you don't remember giving them that power. They just somehow got it, and it's like, well, that's not fair, because you're now such a massive element of my life that I'm kind of dependent on how you're feeling to feel okay myself. And it can be very hard.
I have so many families who relay that level of distress. You know, they're all walking on eggshells. They're all feeling very unsafe, because they know if they put a foot out of line, if they say the wrong thing, if they do the wrong thing, it's just going to blow up in their face. And it's just going to be retribution, you know, over and over again.
I think, sorry, just quickly. It's very, sometimes we have a discussion, I will say discussion, and you go, you're shouting at me, stop shouting at me. And I'm going, I'm not shouting. So I think it can be sometimes, because I don't feel like I'm shouting. I don't think I even sound a little bit angry, and you're going, you're shouting at me. And I'm going, but now you're shouting at me, and you're definitely shouting more than I'm supposedly shouting. And then it's kind of like, oh, now we're both kind of tension, because, you know.
But that's a really good point you've raised, Yasmin, because that one is when, you know, autism is renowned for sensory overload. And it's really awful when you're experiencing high levels of anxiety, because everything is amplified. So when a person is talking, they might raise their voice slightly, but not to the levels that we perceive it is. And it's really distressing, particularly if you're on the receiving end of, you know, like, I know that if I say to you, you're shouting, and I know you'll experience what I experience when you say to me, I'm shouting. It's like, I'm not. And then you get more and more distressed going, oh,
yeah, but then you're confused going, I'm not shouting, I'm so confused. And the other person keeps insisting, you're shouting. And it's like, am I? And it's like, you're not trying, again, you're not trying to gaslight me, but that's kind of what's going on. But you didn't mean it. It's not, you haven't planned to do it. It kind of just happens.
Yeah.
But
it is that level of anxiety, isn't it? It's horrible.
Absolutely.
Really horrible. What about this one? Quite often, we assume that people like to be complimented. So they like to be told they've done a good job. But PD is an interesting one, because a lot of young people absolutely cannot bear being told, you did a great job there, well done you. What's your opinion on that?
My personal preference, I like the occasional compliment, but then there is a level, and you know, for example, we've had our Neds sending compliments, and you've started reading them to me, and I'm like, all right, stop now. This is making me feel I'm done. One or two, I'm okay, but when it like keeps coming in, and it's like, I know they don't mean it sarcastically or insincerely, but because there's so many of them, it's kind of like quality over quantity, so to speak. Like, you know, when there's too many compliments, I'm starting to think, oh my God, they're just saying it to be polite, and it kind of takes away the good feeling I get from it. It's more like, oh, they're saying that because they have to say that, or, you know, they're saying it because they're just trying to be nice, trying to not hurt my feelings. And then I start, you know, overthinking everything, thinking, well, did they really like what I'd done in the first place? It can be very suddenly stressful, because you're like, did they mean it sincerely, or are they just doing it because that's what they think they have to do? So I think I have a limit of like maybe 4 compliments in a row, and then leave me a couple of hours or days, and then you can come back and give another one. But when there's too many, it just takes away the meaning of all of them, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
So I think I've always, excuse me, tried to blend in. I don't want to be singled out. And so I really struggle with with compliments. I've got hugely better over the years. Again, I have learned to mimic. How do you accept a compliment? Just be very gracious, say thank you very much. But like you, I really struggle with that, because it's that spotlight syndrome, isn't it? And it's like, God forbid, the minute that spotlight is put on me, all I do is spend my time analyzing it, questioning the authenticity of it all. And that frustrates me no end, because, we all like to receive compliments deep down, but the way they are given to us is just perplexing. And I don't know whether it's because, for so long of our childhood, we've been deemed a bit problematic, and you kind of just assume I'm clearly not capable, or whether it's that real difficulty of processing it and going, okay, I am actually good at this. And so one of the ways that I work with families is very much about getting them to appreciate that don't put the spotlight, just say we did a good job, or that was great teamwork, we got through this. And I know that I've done that with you quite a lot, to kind of go, we did this, we were successful, or I'm really pleased we've achieved so much today because we did this and this. And it doesn't feel like you did great on this, but just occasionally I know that it's important that we do give the acknowledgement, because otherwise we will then condition our young person to think that they can't do anything without anybody. They have to have somebody constantly, making it a successful teamwork. When I know that all our children have strengths, it's important to remind them of their strengths and to encourage their interests pursuing to build that strength, that resilience.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got another one for you. Blaming or targeting a particular person.
I don't think I do that either.
I don't think I do, but I know that some children and adults do.
I mean, I have sometimes had you kind of go, oh, it feels like you're kind of targeting me there. And it's like, I didn't mean to. It's almost like something gets lost in translation.
Yeah.
It comes from my brain, and my brain's like, it's not targeted towards a particular person. Or, when you say things to me and I go, what have I done now? Or what have I done wrong? It's not because you haven't specifically made it sound like I've done something, but, and then you always go, oh, have you got a guilty conscience or something? So sometimes I think maybe people hear something that's not actually in the subtext, so to speak. Kind of like when you post something on Facebook and then somebody messages you and goes, was that post about me? No, it wasn't. But, if the shoe fits, wear it. I don't know. What do you want me to say?
I think that's a lot, again, about the anxiety, though, isn't it? It becomes amplified, and then you read into something that isn't necessarily there.
Not
try this one.
Combination, but dangerous. Yeah.
Try this one. Denies behaviour has been committed, even when caught red-handed.
I don't think I do that.
I think younger children do that.
I probably have done it. I probably feel like I have been caught doing something.
Yeah, how about the chocolates? Hidden at the top of the wardrobe. And when we came to open them, there was just empty wrappers.
I was okay, yeah, but you have to admit that was talented.
Genius. Yeah, I was fooled.
You didn't find out until right before we were about to open them. So I think that was a very good, and every time you would spot me with them, I'd go, oh yeah, a kid gave them out of class. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was resourceful. I didn't ruin the tape. I got a little finger in there and occasionally took one out one by one. It was crafty.
Certainly was. What about this one? Uses outrageous or shocking behaviour to get out of doing something.
Don't think that applies to me, but
yeah,
because I feel like sometimes it makes it sound like I'm sure she meant it in a different way, but it kind of sounds like, did they do an EastEnders acting? to get out of something? Did they do this dramatic, oh my god, doof 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 ending? Oh my god, what's gonna happen next? I haven't done that. It's not Oscar. Yeah, go on.
I do know that, particularly working with clients, especially inpatients with borderline personality disorders and emotionally unstable, very much characteristics of this, because they were just so distressed. But equally, they couldn't tell a story without making it incredibly dramatic. It was awful. It was the ends of the earth. So yeah. Okay. What about bouts of extreme emotional responses to small events, such as crying, giggling, or becoming furious? And I was doing an initial screening this morning, and the young person, when asked a question that they felt completely unable to answer, would giggle profusely. And some people do that. They giggle a lot throughout because they just feel so anxious, but they're constantly smiling and giggling. So people assume that they're absolutely fine when they are just in so much turmoil and distress. What about you? What did you think about that one?
Interestingly, I don't do it in person, but I do it over text.
Yeah.
Somebody had a go at me the other day for constantly adding the crying, laughing emoji, and I always add it because I worry somebody's going to read it as wrong. So it's kind of like a little symbol of I'm not angry, it's just happy. So they had a go at me going, can't be that funny, you constantly send them. And I went, oh, well, I'm sorry, that's just what I do. I don't do it in person because, I don't do it, but I regularly will send a smiling emoji or a crying, laughing emoji at the end of my sentences. And sometimes it might not look quite in place, but it's the only way I can know that somebody will not read it in the wrong way. It's kind of like a little safety. I could say, don't worry about it, and that can sound quite passive aggressive, but if I add a smiley face next to it, it's like, oh, don't worry about it. It reassures me, because I get so worried that somebody's going to read it as wrong, and then it's going to create an issue out of nothing, really.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel like you, but they do, when they sign their name, they put a kiss. So I'll get people, complete strangers, and they'll be like, I don't know you. Why are you sending me this? But okay, but I get it. It's that wanting to be accepted straight away, isn't it? And just, this is me trying to be nice and friendly. And it's that sheer anxiety yet again, isn't it? Which leads us nicely on to prefers to interact with others in an adopted role or communicate through props and toys. And a lot of young people are heavily into gaming. So that's one way of communicating, but they wouldn't communicate with the same people if they were face to face. But obviously in our lives, we have mobile phones where we can text, which is a huge bonus for a load of us, even though we know that sometimes it might come across as not how we sent it out. But just knowing that we don't have to have that face-to-face conversation, we can do emails or do texting, has just been the best thing ever.
Absolutely. And I find, unfortunately, I kind of still now have a homeschooled life where I don't really have many in real life friends. So I have quite a few social media friends and stuff. And I think sometimes the way I'm online is not the way I am in person. So I always feel like I have to send a little terms and conditions warning. Yasmin may not be the same in person, because even if I could be talking to someone for a year or 2 months and I'm super confident with them, as soon as the idea of meeting them in person, I am suddenly like, oh my God, and it's not like I've been lying about who I am or what I'm like, but I suddenly get really nervous that they're not going to like me, or I'm going to be too awkward, and that's going to be really off-putting.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more because we've only got 5 minutes left, but just thinking about making an effort to retain your reputation with peers. Now, a lot of young people don't bother with this, but equally, there are a lot of people who feel they absolutely have to maintain what they perceive to be a reputation. So it might be a reputation for being a bit of a ball buster in, a gang, or it might be girls having to wear full makeup, looking their absolute best. They can't go out of the house without makeup. Or without, wearing formal clothes, for some ladies even, they can't go out with wet hair. I don't know what you think about that one.
Again, I find this is something that applies to me, but in some situations, it's where I've had to adapt to kind of feel safe. So, for example, at school, I was always the good student, the quiet student. So when I was in that situation with that infamous geography teacher where I was saying to myself, I want to walk out, I feel uncomfortable, but I was also thinking to myself, I can't leave because then I won't be seen as the good child anymore. I'll be seen as one of the troublemakers, and I really didn't want that. So I was getting so stressed going, I'm uncomfortable. I've got this, and this wrong. I have every right to get up and leave. But I was so terrified that people were going to think I was misbehaving, or I was, trying to cause trouble from removing myself from a situation that made me very uncomfortable. And, that unfortunately ended up kind of blowing up in my face. But,
Yeah. Okay. Let's finish on this one because I know you'll have a hoot at me. Seems as if distracted from within. So when you see me thinking about things, you always say to me, I look a bit gormless.
Yeah.
But a lot of us are thinking internally about things, and of course we just look really vacant, don't we, in our expressions, and that's quite difficult for people who are wondering what on earth is going on. It's almost like, hello, lights are on but nobody's home, and it's just that we're busy thinking.
Well, I agree that that's what people have, but you are another level. You are an absolute another level. Because I have physically gone, hello, and you've kind of gone, yeah, and then before you let me finish my sentence again, you're back to, and it's like, what's happened? I've lost you. It's like radio signal. It's like, oh, I'm in, no, out of frequency again. What's that about? And then sometimes as well, you have this weird moment where we will have a full-on conversation. I will ask you for advice of something, and you will give me very in-depth advice. And then later on, you'll go, I'll say, oh, can you just repeat that advice to me? What advice? What? And then I go, this conversation we had earlier. What conversation? I don't remember that. You had a full-on conversation? No, I didn't. I'm not going crazy. We had a conversation. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess we did then. And it's like, okay.
If it's any consolation, you do the same to me. But that is a really interesting point because, it's that memory capacity. It's gone. We've had that. I don't really remember it. It's gone. In the moment, I'm thinking about something else that's more pressing on my brain and trying to think back. I'm like, I don't know. But it's an interesting point that Professor Newson has raised, because it doesn't strike me as being anxiety provoking until you do what you do of saying, but we had this conversation, and I'm like, did we? And then I get really stressed going, I'm losing my mind, but it's that inability to hang on to the wretched information because it's just gone.
Which is why I now, every email you send me regarding work, I save it because you insist. I sent you this email, and I'll pull it out going, no, you didn't. And you go, oh, well, I should have. And it's like, what do you want me to do about that? It was in
here, obviously.
But I also find that it can be in the spoken form as well. Like, I know regularly you're having a conversation and you might do like a brief subtitle of what the conversation's going to be about. And then I do this a lot. Like, hurry up, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. Because it's like, I don't need to see the previews. Let's just get to the main story. Go. And then it feels like, because when you're doing the, no offense, not relevant stuff in the conversation, I'm like, okay. And I'm trying really hard to focus on it, going, this wasn't what she said it was about. So I'm trying to really hard to focus. And I know I've got this amount of time for you to capture my attention. Otherwise, I am gone. So I'm like, can we just speed through the first bit? I don't need this. I don't get to the point.
And that's interesting again, because you're showing the impatience.
Yeah.
I'm showing the anxiety of, if I don't tell you all these bits of detail, which I think is really important details, but you can see how this kind of just blows up in people's faces.
But like, I it's only recently that I realised I do the gesture. That's when I know it's like, because I regularly just go, and it's like, I don't think anybody else knows what it means, but I'm like, okay, we just get over this part. You know.
Yeah. So we need to wrap up. Thank you so much for your contributions yet again. What would you say is a kind of pearl of wisdom regarding PDA for families?
Have I been coming out with pearls of wisdom in the past? I'm not quite sure.
Well, I'm just thinking about, because PDA is not an easy area to understand. There are so many different strands to it. As Professor Newsom did, worked out, there are quite a lot. But I suppose it's being very open-minded to the understanding that, if you have autism and ADHD tends to be the common trend with PDA, you've kind of got an awful lot of reasons why you experience such levels of anxiety. It's not the feeling, the need to control for everybody with PDA. They do want to feel safe, but it is most definitely thinking about that aversion to the adrenaline coming in. That it's such an uncomfortable feeling. And because of that, a lot of people don't really appreciate. They think it's more about defiant behavior rather than crippling anxiety. And I know we've run out of time, but perhaps we could look at it another time, coming back to this, because it's always prevalent, for so many of our young people, to kind of consider it from a school's perspective, and the impacts on the young people. Okay.
It's kind
all
of
right.
like,
well, we're going to have to wrap it up. Sorry.
No, it's kind of like a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Where you've got your autism, you've got your, and it overlaps, and some things
definitely
can be familiar and do kind of duplicate themselves, which can make it kind of a bit more hard to pinpoint, is it this or is it this? And I think it's just taking time to kind of work out what your thing is,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Next week, I am actually going to be doing a road trip all the way down to Cornwall. I'm going to be visiting the Autism Cafe, in Hale, where I'm going to be met by Leah Compton, who's going to be joining me. Very kindly has agreed to join me. So it'll be interesting to see how far we get with it, because obviously I don't know the room that I'm going to be in with Leah, and I don't know how well the Wi-Fi will be received, but we're certainly going to give it our best shots. Thank you so much to every one of you who's joined us today. I hope that's been really insightful, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.